Every Sunday at exactly 4 p.m., she stood on the same platform, in the same faded blue dress, staring at the tracks. The years had carved lines into her face. But her eyes never lost that quiet, stubborn hope. The townsfolk had long stopped asking who she was waiting for. For them, she had become part of the scenery, like the station clock that hadn't worked in years. Every week, she carried the same old leather satchel, inside it, a single envelope, sealed and untouched. Some called it madness. Others called it devotion. She called it a promise. 50 years ago, on this very platform, someone had asked her to wait, just until they came back. No one knew who he was, or why he never returned. No one, except her. The years passed, seasons changed, but she returned, week after week. She stopped counting the years. The promise had become her life. Somewhere deep inside, she believed he would return. And she would be here. 50 years is a long time to wait, but for her, the story was only beginning. By now, the station workers greeted her with silent nods. They'd learned not to ask questions, and she never offered answers. The younger generation didn't know her story. To them, she was simply the station lady. Every Sunday, she'd sit on the same bench, open her satchel, and run her fingers over that envelope, as if it could speak. 50 years, untouched. As if opening it would end the promise too soon. Some Sundays were harder than others. Rain would soak her clothes, wind would cut through her coat, but she stayed. Other Sundays felt like spring. The air was warm, the light was gentle, and hope felt close enough to touch. She'd watch the trains come and go, strangers reunited, goodbyes whispered, but never for her. And still, she waited. But behind those tired eyes, was a memory. And memories can outlast a lifetime. It all began, on a summer afternoon in 1972. She was just 22, full of dreams, and about to leave for the city. But fate had other plans. That's when she saw him, tall, in a crisp soldier's uniform, scanning the crowd with searching eyes. Their eyes met, and in that single heartbeat, the noise of the station faded away. He walked toward her, introduced himself as Daniel. He had 2 hours before his train. They talked about everything, their dreams, their fears, and the lives they wished they could share. But time has a cruel way of moving faster when you wish it would stop. His train was called. He stood, hesitated, then reached into his coat. He told her not to open it until he returned. "I promise I will," she said. Then, he stepped onto the train, turned back for one last look, and was gone. That was the day the promise was made. And for her, it was never broken. She went to the city as planned, but her heart stayed on that platform. Every Sunday, no matter where she lived, she took the train back to that small station. She had chances to love again, but no one could compete with a promise. Friends moved away, family members passed on, but she kept returning. The town changed, new buildings, new faces, but the platform remained. Sometimes she wondered if he was even alive, but her heart refused to believe otherwise. The envelope aged with her. Its edges frayed, its color faded, but it stayed sealed. Each Sunday, she sat, and listened for the sound of his train. Year after year, the platform became her church, her sanctuary, her prison. And then, one Sunday in late autumn, everything changed. The wind carried the scent of rain that afternoon when he appeared, a man in his early 40s, with eyes searching for something, or someone. His gaze locked on her small flower shop, and he paused before entering. He stepped in, the bell above the door chiming softly. She looked up from her work, her hands froze, and for a moment, it was as if the world had gone silent. "Are you Anna Moore?" the man asked. His voice trembled slightly, as if he'd rehearsed this moment for years. Anna's throat went dry. "Yes. I am." The man took a deep breath and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, weathered envelope, edges frayed, the paper yellowed with age. "This was meant for you. 50 years ago." His words hit her like a wave. Her fingers shook as she reached out. She recognized the handwriting instantly, and her knees nearly gave way. Her mind flooded with memories. The scent of the sea, his laughter, the night he promised to return. She blinked back to the present, tears now streaming freely. Who gave you this?" she whispered. The man hesitated. "I think I'm the one you were waiting for." Anna flips the sign to closed. The shop falls quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the scent of lilies. She sets the unopened envelope on the small worktable. Thomas sits opposite, hands clasped. "Please," she whispers, "tell me why it took 50 years. Thomas draws a slow breath. "My name is Thomas Reed. Daniel Reed's son." Anna doesn't move, only her eyes widen, shining. "He had a son. Thomas, he wrote this before he shipped out." The letter was handed to a friend in his unit, Corporal Lewis, in case anything happened. A flicker of sepia memories crosses Anna's face. Thomas, Lewis was wounded. He kept the letter safe, but he never made it back to this town. It traveled with him, to hospitals, transfers, and then to a storage box when he died. Anna's fingers hover over the envelope. She can't break the seal. "Thomas, last year, when Lewis's niece cleared his things, she found a bundle labeled Promises to Deliver. My name and address were inside for contact. My mother kept in touch with his old unit. That's how it reached me." "Anna, why didn't you open it?" "Thomas, because it was never mine to open. He wrote it for you. I only carried it the last mile." Thomas slides a small photo across the table, Daniel in 1972, grinning in sunlight. Anna cups it with both hands. "Hello, you," she breathes, as if he might answer. "Thomas," softly, "he didn't make it home, Anna, but there's more you should know, why he asked you to wait." Anna's hand rises to the seal, then stops. "Thomas, if you can, open it where you made the promise. At the platform. One last Sunday, together." Anna closes her eyes, nods. "Next Sunday. 4 o'clock. Anna picks up the envelope, holds it to her heart, and exhales. The shop lights dim as if the day itself is bowing. Cut to the station clock, 3:59 p.m., then black. Her hands trembled as she finally unfolded the fragile letter, the ink faded, but the words still burned with life. She read the first line aloud, and her voice broke, "I promised I'd come back for you, even if it took my whole life." The letter was dated exactly 50 years ago, the day he had vanished without a trace. Each sentence painted a picture, a war he never intended to fight, a prison he never chose, and a promise that had been his only light. He had written of nights when the only thing that kept him alive was the thought of her smile. And then, the words that cut deepest, "I never stopped walking toward you, even when the road was taken from me." Her tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink, as if their time apart was bleeding into the present. At the end, he had signed his name, the same signature she had traced in her mind for 50 long years. She clutched the letter to her chest, whispering the name as if it could bridge the decades. And in that moment, the years melted away. She wasn't an old woman anymore, she was the girl he had loved. The old woman sat on the porch, the letter now resting quietly in her lap. The sun's first rays touched her face, painting her in gold. She had waited, loved, and hoped for half a century. And now, the promise was fulfilled. She whispered into the wind, "I kept my word. I waited, just like I promised." The wind carried her words into the distance. The townsfolk gathered outside her gate, not to gossip anymore, but to honor her. In their eyes, she was no longer the strange old woman, she was a legend. One young girl stepped forward, holding flowers. For the woman who taught us what love really means, she said. The old woman took the flowers and smiled. Promise me, she said to the girl, that you will keep your word, no matter how long it takes. Years later, that little girl would tell her own children about the woman who waited, and the legend would live on. And so, her love was no longer just her own, it belonged to everyone who heard her story. In the end, the promise wasn't about time, it was about love strong enough to last beyond it. Her porch, her flowers, her story, remained, even after she was gone. And just like that, the woman who waited, became immortal, in the hearts of all who remembered.